Welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, April 12th. Tonight we'll be discussing jet stream roller winds, surface level pressure, significant wave heights, and all the things that go into making surf in the North Pacific Ocean. Let's get to work. Looking at significant wave heights for the North Pacific Ocean, we see a gale, yes, believe it or not, a gale developing just west of the dateline with 31-foot seas aimed off to the east, already getting traction on the ocean surface and generating swell that is going to radiate towards Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast. Maybe not huge, but swell nonetheless from the northern hemi. We'll take it. All right, let's get into the details. But given the time of year, we're going to start in the southern hemisphere. Right now, we're looking at jet stream level winds. These winds up about 30,000 feet help support the formation of gales, and when they form, help direct their track. We're looking for a trough, just like this, pushing to the north. That helps form a counterclockwise flow aloft and down at the ocean surface. That is the hallmark of low pressure in the southern hemisphere. And of course, low pressure, if it's strong enough, generates wind. Wind, if it lasts long enough and blows hard enough in your direction, generates seas. Seas eventually turn into swell, and swell and hit your beach, create surf. So troughs are very important. So there is a little trough. It's kind of pinched, but there's a decent amount of wind pushing up into it, 120 knots, and it is capable of supporting gale development in this region just south of New Zealand right there. But then, just east of New Zealand, big ridge builds pushing hard to the south. That's generating high pressure here, pretty much shutting the storm track down. But then also notice another trough is developing in Southern California, like San Diego's like about 117 west right there. So this is the cutoff for the Southern California swell window. So it's possible that there could be some support for gale development here as well, and aimed in the California swell window. Right, let's put this into motion. As we move into Monday, notice the trough, it kind of gets cut off here a little bit, but it's just southeast of New Zealand with, 110 knot winds, supportive of perhaps gale development right here along New Zealand. We'll keep our eyes on that. Of course, this broader trough over here in the far southeast Pacific, also capable of generating gale and in the California swell window. That situation continues about into Tuesday. Now notice this trough is getting cut off, winds cutting under it, so most of the wind energy is not radiating up here around the trough, so that doesn't do as much to help support gale development, but still maybe a little bit of support into Tuesday. And at the same time, the trough here in the far southeast Pacific starts moving out of the California swell window, and that's the end of that. Big ridge in control as you get into Wednesday, just shutting down the South Pacific. Look at this. The southern branch way down here, 70 south. Now the ice line's even further south than that at this time of year, but for the most part, no wind strong enough and no real troughs indicated. So we'll just sort of blast through this. We're continuing into Sunday, and we are a week out. A hint of maybe just the faintest hint of a trough here southeast of New Zealand. But after that, things look pretty meager. Let's go take a look at surface level pressure and surface level winds. And here we go, as expected. There is a gale so this is the Tasman Sea. There's New Zealand there, Australia there. Tasman Sea, gale pushing 35 knot winds up into the Tasman Sea. We're not so much interested in that. And notice winds here 35 knots, but they're all aimed south at Antarctica, so no hope for anyone yet. Also, gale in the southeast Pacific, just as expected, 30-35 knot southeast winds. Building a little bit, but not as strong as what the models were projecting a couple of days ago. Now here, as we get into Monday morning, look at this gale. This is actually almost like a cutoff gale, developing 45. Does it get to 50? There we go, 50 knot winds at 18Z on Monday. So Hawaii up roughly around up here on the other side of the equator. These winds aimed right at Hawaii. Good potential for swell development there. The gale in the southeast Pacific fading out. Tuesday, the gale along New Zealand starting to fade, but still present, still generating swell, and then things pretty much go quiet after that. We'll take a look. We'll run through everything. Yeah, there was a gale off here, but that's outside the California swell window. And then you see most of the energy mirroring what is in the jet stream running west to east, way down to the south. We're into Sunday. Still nothing of any interest and 180 hours out. So we have one gale there, one gale forecast there. That's all in the next, we'll say, 48 hours or so, and then things get pretty quiet in the southern hemi. Let's go take a look at the effect of those winds on the ocean surface. So we are into Tuesday. Oh, actually, we're going back in time. Sorry, this is a week ago. There was a tiny little gale. See, all the activity's been here in the Southeast Pacific. It seems like for the past 2 weeks, everything starts blurring into the same. So this is typically a La Nina kind of pattern when everything's over here. If it's El Nino, especially the year after El Nino, then the Southwest Pacific, for whatever reason, really comes online. But everything's over here. All right, so Tuesday, small gale developed in the far eastern edge of the southern of the California swell window, 29-foot seas, barely 30 feet right there in one little tiny pixel, and 29 feet fading out. This has produced a small swell, very south angle, radiating north towards California, maybe Southern California Monday night, Northern California into Tuesday. Don't expect a whole lot, but something perhaps. Now we'll roll this out. Now, there was another storm that developed south of Tasmania on Thursday. This one got pretty strong. There you go, 50-foot seas. Now, the Great Circle Paths here relative to California go like right up like that. So this was actually in the swell window. I think it was 214, 216 degrees, something like that. And it pushed due east into Friday and almost started falling southeast. The thought is small and even 40-foot seas into almost Saturday morning. This thing quickly died out as it moved into the greater Southwest Pacific. So it's a Tasman sea swell coming up the east side of New Zealand, probably for the most part bypassing Hawaii. California, small, very long period energy, probably a very long wait between sets. You're looking at, I think it's like 6,800 nautical miles away from over here. So a very long travel distance to get into California. Better part of 10 days, something like that. So small swell should result, but nothing too outrageous, nothing to get too excited about. All right, now we're current time. Let's go take a look at the forecast. So here we are. So here, there's this trough here off New Zealand, small gale developing, all shadowed by New Zealand relative to Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast. And then the remnants of the storm with the 50-foot seas that was here, racing east, redeveloping slightly Sunday night in the Southeast Pacific. You can see, what is that, 20, 22, 24, 26-foot seas. So this is even a downgrade from what it was. We'll give it, maybe 14-second period swell, maybe 15-second period swell radiating north about a week later into California. This is more of interest. So starting 18Z Monday, 39-foot seas, building to, what is that? They're saying 42 feet. That seems like a bit of a stretch. But we'll say 40-foot seas over a very small area. But the system's pretty far to the north. Hawaii certainly should do pretty well. And even California should get something out of it. Unshadowed by Tahiti, this would probably be about a 215, 220 degree angle swell. We'll have to look at the Great Circle charts to confirm, but roughly about that. So unshadowed for the most part. And then that system fades out. And then beyond that, we'll just take a look. Yes, a system moving into the Tasman Sea with 33, 32-foot seas. Maybe some background swell make it through here, through Fiji and the islands up into Hawaii, but generally nothing too noticeable expected. And there we are, a week out, nothing going on. Let's go take a look up north. So here's our gale. Also notes there is another, I'll call it a low pressure system north of Hawaii. What's that, maybe 15-foot seas or something. So wind swell pushing into the Hawaiian Islands. But this, far more interesting, building a little bit and falling southeast into this evening. And then by Monday starting to drop off. But still, swell, pretty decent footprint. And then another system even behind that pushing off Japan with 30-foot seas. Up to 32-foot seas on Tuesday night working itself towards the date line. We'll call it 29, 30-foot seas as we get into Wednesday, and then finally fading, not quite making it to the date line. So one swell for the Hawaiian Islands, and actually with theoretically pretty surprising size if it develops as expected. I mean, not huge surf, but certainly more than the head-high sort of thing that's been going on, and maybe another swell behind that. We'll roll this out, see what's going on, and then theoretically the remnants of that gale, the models have been teasing, they're not really sure. I don't believe any of this at the moment, but perhaps a gale developing in the northwestern Gulf on Sunday, Monday with, we'll call it 23, 24-foot seas over a pretty good footprint aimed to the east. So maybe a run of late season west to northwest swell into California and the Hawaiian Islands. Very interesting situation, with at the same time swell coming from the southern hemi. So we go from zero to all of a sudden swell coming from all directions, if one is to believe the models. And then let's take a look, wind swell potential. Well, nothing for Hawaii. California, yes, we have north winds, 20 knots, typical pressure grade. There's high pressure there. Weak low pressure inland creates this sort of difference between the two, creates wind, north winds. So a little junky wind swell along the California coast. Nothing too exciting. If you're locked in your house and you can't get to the beach and you don't live near the beach, you are not missing anything. It is not worth driving. Not worth getting a ticket either. I believe people are getting ticketed for driving to the beach. So it just isn't worth it. Anyway, Monday, a little bit more wind swell, and continuing, basically this pattern continues. Tuesday, relative to California, things breaking down. East winds start picking up relative to the Hawaiian Islands, maybe some wind swell there. The gradient picks up on Wednesday, 20 to 25 knot north winds over Cape Mendocino, building more wind swell for Northern California, weak wind swell for exposed east-facing shores of the Hawaiian Islands. Thursday, things back off a little bit. Low pressure should start building into this area. You get into Friday, you see the gradient and winds fading relative to California. I mean, once you get south of, we'll say, Point Reyes or Bodega Bay, something like that, winds generally light all week. And then even for Hawaii, things fade out as we get into the weekend. You see low pressure gurgling off in the northwestern Gulf. We're into Sunday. We're a week out now, and still light winds and a relatively weak pressure pattern. So are there any odds for rain or snow in California? Well, and then we're just focusing on California here. Basically, high pressure in control. Yes, scattered showers over the Sierra at times, typically in the afternoons or early to late afternoons. We're looking, there's maybe a hint of snow over the higher elevations of the central to southern Sierra on Friday. Whoops, went too fast there. Friday. And then into Sunday. And then look at this, as we get almost a week out, weak low pressure off the coast, some rain pushing in, and maybe even some snow over higher elevations of Tahoe down into Yosemite. We're only a week out here. With some other models we've looked at suggest even perhaps a little bit more behind that. Let's go take a look at the snow forecast. All right, here we go. We're just going to blast through this. We're looking, Tahoe's there. San Francisco Bay Area, Sierra's right in there. Of course, you can check other places as well. Actually, look at that. Jackson Hole, decent snow up in that area on Wednesday. And then we're really looking, though, here we go. Here comes we wouldn't call it a snow event, but scattered snow showers Friday. Then here comes the low. This is a 10-day model. Building snow for the Sierra on Sunday afternoon into maybe Monday. Rain, maybe down to Monterey Bay. Pretty light rain. Our guess is that will probably even fall off the model as you get later into, get closer to that time. But something to keep our eye on. Maybe the rainfall isn't completely over for California yet. So according to the GFS model, if you're going to believe that, 11 inches of snow, a little bit more than a week out at Squaw Valley. Again, it's not open. Snow levels almost down to the base, so that's about 6,200 feet and about 9,000 feet to the top. So snow to the top, but down at the bottom, probably liquid precipitation. Wind, not bad. 30 knot, disgusting over the top. Kirkwood, not as generous. We'll call it 6 to 8 inches. The good news is it would be frozen precipitation the whole way to the bottom, and wind, not an issue. Mammoth, not doing as well. We'll call it 2 inches, maybe 3. And pretty much snow the whole way to the bottom when and if it happens, right around. So yeah, actually looks like liquid precipitation down low. Once you get above 9,000 feet though, okay. And wind, not an issue. All right, let's go take a look long term. What's going on with the Madden-Julian oscillation and of course El Nino or La Nina or somewhere in between. All right, so first up, the MJO discussion. We like to look for the presence of the active phase of the MJO, and of course the active phase of the MJO, when in the West Pacific, specifically this area we call the Kelvin wave generation area. So here is the equator. Here's the East Pacific here. This is the West Pacific. This is data from the TAO buoy array, a series of buoys strung across the equator. Used for monitoring El Nino, but you also get a sense of what's going on with the MJO. The MJO, when in the active phase, suppresses trades in the West Pacific. So we're looking at the arrows. The wind's pretty solid out of the east over the East Pacific, over the Central Pacific, and over the Kelvin wave generation area. That area from 170 west, just east of the dateline, 5 degrees north and south of the equator, to the whole way to the far West Pacific, about 135 east, right in here. You see, these are 5-day average winds out of the east, north of the equator, but light south of the equator. But it's not the actual winds, it's the anomalies. Differences from normal for this time of year. And you actually see trades, the winds are pretty light right in here, and that's the net result is it's like westerly winds. The trades have almost reversed themselves in this area. This is good because they have been strong out of the east, stronger than normal, creating upwelling. This might be an opportunity to build warm water in this part of the Pacific. Going over the Central Pacific, pretty much a neutral wind pattern, and very, very weak out of the west over the Kelvin wave generation area. So no strong signs of the active phase of the MJO at this point in time, but no signs of the inactive phase either, because if it was, winds would be abnormally strong out of the east here. What have winds been doing the past 5 days? All right, this is 850 millibar wind anomalies, differences from normal for this time of year. There's South America, Central America, Mexico, Australia, New Guinea, the equator right across there, and the dateline right there. Kelvin wave generation area right in here. We're looking for west anomalies. If you see the reds and the arrows out of the west, I know it's a very small image, but you can see westerly anomalies in the Kelvin wave generation area on April 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, getting a little bit weaker. Now, down here, that doesn't matter. It's just this little area right around in here. So it looks like the active phase of the MJO was in control, but it also looks like it's fading as we get closer to today. All right, what's the forecast for the next week? All right, so this is the whole planet on one chart. The date line runs right down the middle of the chart. Kelvin wave generation area between about 135 east, so we'll say there. You draw a line in your mind going the whole way up the chart there. And to 170 west, so right about there. This is past performance, these dates here. So you see, and westerly anomalies are the yellows, oranges, and reds. So it looks like we've been in the active phase of the MJO pretty much the whole month of April. And as of today, that's probably the last day of it. We see easterly anomalies forecast to build. The good news is they're much weaker than what was forecast a couple of days ago, but still pretty solid for 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 days, and then fading, but still easterly, so suggesting you can almost see the active phase of the MJO moving. So California is like 122 west, 120. So active phase of the MJO moving over California. So that would give us a potential the next week for precipitation, maybe. And the inactive phase building over the Kelvin wave generation area, likely starting to not support energy transfer to the jet stream. And looking at the models, we know we're in pretty good shape for, what, about 4 days, something like that. And then things start falling apart. So that pretty much syncs up with active phase here, inactive phase, storm development here, and lingering a little bit, and then fading. Let's go a little bit further into the future. All right, we'll go 2 weeks out. This is the outgoing long wave radiation forecast, another component of the MJO. The active phase of the MJO makes clouds. The inactive phase stomps on clouds. So the reds are not like westerly anomalies. It's the exact opposite. Higher numbers, more sunlight reflectivity off the ocean surface, therefore meaning the inactive phase of the MJO over the maritime continent today. Here's the last little bits of our active phase over the dateline today. 5 days from now, that pretty much fading. Inactive phase moving into the West Pacific, and it's in control 10 days out and 15 days out. This per the statistic model. The dynamic model pretty much telling us the exact same picture. Look at the end image here. Look at, and here we go, the end image here. They're almost exactly alike. I can't seem to get both of them on the same. There we go. So basically, the two models are in sync, which pretty much means odds are good for this outcome. In short, the inactive phase in control starting in a couple of days and going on for at least 2 weeks. Phase diagram charts. All right, so what are we looking at? Assume you're looking down on the North Pole from up above the Earth, and the MJO rotates around the equator, both the active and inactive phases from west to east, from the Indian Ocean over the maritime continent, over the West Pacific, East Pacific, under the United States, across the Atlantic, over North Africa, back to the Indian Ocean. The heavy dot is where the active phase is. The further away from this circle it is, the stronger it is. So we'll call it a modest to moderate active phase of the MJO, looking like it's maybe in the Atlantic Ocean or the Gulf of Mexico, maybe something like that as of right now. And the three members of the model suggest it moving off to the east, generally in the Indian Ocean 2 weeks from now, and quite weak. The GEFS model, the dynamic model, suggesting the same thing, only with the MJO a little bit stronger and moving a little bit further to the east, maybe making it into the eastern maritime continent. Either way, wherever the active phase is, the inactive phase is 180 degrees away, so the inactive phase 2 weeks from now would probably be over in the Central Pacific about that time. So basically, inactive phase in control for the next 2 weeks for the Pacific. All right, let's go take a look at the upper level model. This is a 40-day forecast. So each little picture is I think it's a 5-day time step. So South America, Central America, the equator right there, dateline roughly there, New Guinea, Australia, maritime continent right there. You get it, Kelvin wave generation area right there. So this runs about a week ahead what's actually going on down at the surface. This is up at jet stream level. Anyway, active phase of the MJO, pushing over the Central America today with the inactive phase building in the West Pacific. You can see in 5 days the active phase gone in the Atlantic, with the inactive phase pretty strong building over the entire Pacific and making its trek across the Pacific through about, we'll say, May 7th. At that time, the active phase starts building in the far West Pacific. It makes its trek across the Pacific through the end of the model run was at May 22nd. So this would be a good window here for swell production. We'll say the month of May. The last part of April, though, is pretty much a shutdown. And then at the end of May, you sense another inactive phase starting to build in the West Pacific. Next up, the CFS model. So this goes out a month, and this gives you a little bit more of a surface level view. It's 850 millibar zonal wind anomalies. It's actually up 4,700 feet, but that's a pretty good proxy for what's going on at the surface. All right, so again, whole planet on one chart. Kelvin wave generation area starts here, goes over to about here. All right. The solid contour is the active phase of the MJO. This model suggests the active phase is still going to be in control, we'll say maybe 5 days out in the Kelvin wave generation area. But notice, east anomalies in control of the Kelvin wave generation area. And after this, the MJO just gets extremely weak. No sign of it anywhere for the next month. But with these pockets of easterly anomalies pretty much in control, no sign of westerly anomalies. So this does not look particularly favorable for storm development even into May. So then we go even further out. This is the 3-month CFS model, 850 millibar zonal wind anomalies. Now the difference on this one is the what has happened in the past is at the bottom and the forecast goes to the top, and there's a marked pattern here. Kelvin wave generation area from here up to about here. Here are past active phases of the MJO and associated westerly wind bursts in January and February. And here's our last little active phase. We're just eyeballing this with westerly anomalies. There's our little pocket of easterly anomalies. And then right after that, literally no westerly anomalies of any time forecast until we get into June, when I assume that is another active phase of the MJO. Let's test our knowledge. Boom, overlay. All right, so here's the solid contour. Here's our active phase of the MJO we're in right now, even with easterly anomalies. It fades out April 20th, and then look at this, just a big, long-lasting, inactive phase of the MJO setting up from, April 22nd till probably June 7th, something like that. Yeah, little pockets of westerly winds, but for the most part, a dead neutral wind pattern, no support really to feed energy into the jet stream until you get out here into the late May timeframe, and then a pretty solid active phase of the MJO is forecast. That said, kind of have my doubts about that. That's 2 months out. Not sure if I believe it, but we'll see. All right, and then the low-pass filter. Let's see what it's telling. Oh, even a less encouraging picture here. All right, so we have been in 2 to 3. So this solid contour, low-pressure bias, it's been sitting over the date line for 2 years now. It is supposed to completely die on May 14th, never to return, or at least not anytime soon. Now, the interesting part, this blocking pattern, high-pressure pattern that's been in the Indian Ocean, you can see the easterly anomalies that have been associated with it. It's supposed to die too at the same time. Now the question is, will this flip and have the high pressure bias built in the Pacific Ocean and the low pressure bias set up in the Indian Ocean? If it does, that's a sure sign of La Nina. But as of right now, through July, no clear sign of La Nina, just this neutral, ENSO-neutral pattern forecast, though it smells very much like La Nina with these stronger, longer-lasting, inactive phases of the MJO projected. But we'll have to see. We are in the spring unpredictability barrier. The models have a hard time knowing what's really going to happen. It's not till you get to, we'll say, mid to late May that sort of starts sorting itself out, and the models have a better feel for what's going to go on in the future. So all this is a big question mark as of right now. All right, what is going on in the ocean? We're going to move away from the MJO discussion now and talk more about El Nino, La Nina. All right, so data from the TAO buoy array. This is the East Pacific, this is the West Pacific. These are the anchor lines on the TAO buoys. They're just centered right there along the equator. The X's are the sensors on those anchor lines. They pick up data. They beam it up to a central database in Maryland. A model is applied, and you build a profile of what subsurface temperatures, ocean temperatures look like. Okay, we're looking for Kelvin waves. We're looking for where is the balance of warm water. Right now, looks like it's in the West Pacific, 30-degree isotherm, 30 degrees centigrade. Here, well west of the dateline, 29-degree isotherm, about where it was last week on the dateline. 28-degree isotherm, bit back to being about 160 west, but also starting to show signs of even moving further west than that. That said, you go, well, that kind of looks La Nina-ish, but at the same time, the 24-degree isotherm still flowing pretty well into the East Pacific, suggesting warm water is still being transported from west to east from Kelvin waves. All right, and here's anomalies, differences from normal for this time of year. You just see this broad pool of, we'll call it warmish water. 1-degree pockets. This is probably the last Kelvin wave right here. Kelvin wave number 6, pushing east into Ecuador. 2 other small pockets. And the other part is, if this was really robust, it would be down to like 150 meters deep. But what do we have? Instead, we have -2. It was -3 degrees centigrade yesterday. And it sure looks like it's trying to push off to the east. This is the pattern you get. You start to get cold water building off of here. If you were having La Nina develop. Now, we're not saying we think La Nina is developing yet, but it certainly doesn't look like El Nino. Let's go look at another model. Here we go, another model. Now this is interesting. Here's our warm water pool. It's the same raw data, and it is the same deal, about 100 meters deep, maybe 110 meters. Now there's this cool pool off of Ecuador here, and here is the other cool pool building under, we'll call it the date line in the Central Pacific. We do not want to see this racing east, joining up with this and locking this warm pool out, but the other thing is, we don't see this warm pool moving east at all. It seems like there is cool water stuck right here. We'll have to take a look at the surface and see what's going on. But before we do that, a quick look at upper ocean heat anomalies. This is the West Pacific here, East Pacific here, and we're going back in time a year ago. 2 stalled Kelvin waves last summer made it about halfway across the Pacific and just died. And cool water set up off of Ecuador. Then Kelvin wave number 5 in September, active phase of the MJO, blew westerly winds over the West Pacific, took warm water there, pushed it off to the east. 3 to 4 months later, it shows up off of Ecuador, and you get a warm pool building there. Of course, if you get successive Kelvin waves that are strong enough, that's how you can develop El Nino. All right, and then our final Kelvin wave 6, which is actually from that January, February westerly wind bursts, active phases, the MJO, is trying to push east, but it almost looks like it's stalled, very much like what happened this past summer. Looks like it, is stalled there. There's our upwelling phase of the Kelvin wave cycle, and the other little bit of concern is this cool water thing working its way behind it off to the east. And you notice in the past year, it's actually been in the past 2 years, we've never seen anything as strong as this, suggesting that this long-running Kelvin wave pattern, reasonably strong active phases of the MJO, it's just been nonstop for 2 years now. Looks like it's going to come to a close. And then sea level anomalies. The height of the ocean, strip away the wind waves, strip away the swell, strip away, anything tides. And what we're looking for is a bump on the ocean surface. So here's the equator, South America there, Central America, New Guinea there, dateline there, equator. And there was a pool of 5 centimeters anomalies last week here. It's been getting steadily smaller all week. In fact, a month ago it was filling this whole area, but now it is all but gone, suggesting that Kelvin wave that we were seeing is just evaporating underwater, that it will not make it to Ecuador, and that we're pretty much, and it's just 5 degrees north and south of the equator that we're interested in here. Here's the last little bit of it, and we think that is the end of that. All right, so what's going on at the surface? Enough of the subsurface. The subsurface temperature profile there sort of says that it appears that the Kelvin wave cycle is dying. On the surface, things look pretty good. I mean, we have warm water off of Peru. You have this persistent pocket of upwelling cool water off of Peru and Ecuador, but doesn't even make it to the Galapagos, and it's just not that bad. And you have a lot of warm water off of Mexico, and it's all straddling the equator here, making it the whole way to the dateline. It actually looks like El Nino, a very weak version of El Nino, but El Nino is just the same. Yes, we have upwelling off of California and Mexico and way off of Peru here. That is not unusual this time of year. In the spring, high pressure gets very strong. The reality is high pressure has not been that strong in terms of generating winds. I mean, normally March and April is just a windy mess along the coast. It hadn't been that bad. If anything, it's been kind of quiet, which is strange. Temperature's still pretty cool, but, no clear sign of like raging La Nina or anything like that. So it seems like at the surface, we're in some sort of a very weak El Nino-ish type pattern, but subsurface-wise, it looks like, well, that whatever's generating the warmth might be fading. And looking at the models from an MJO perspective, we see no clear signs of westerly wind bursts of the active phase of the MJO to generate more Kelvin waves to take warm water and transport it east. So basically, this is the remnant of 2 years worth of previous activity where that the underpinnings of it all are disappearing now, and it'll be interesting to see where we end up. sea surface temperature trend. This is for the last 7 days. Pretty much neutral along Peru, a little bit of pocket of cooling last 7 days off of Ecuador, and warming from the Galapagos on out to about point, we'll say roughly south of Hawaii. No clear signs of cooling, no clear signs of a significant warming event, so kind of just a mixed bag. It is what it is, you know, nothing. We've been saying this for a couple weeks now. There's no clear forcing factor going one way or the other for right now. And then the overview trend here. Warm water off of Mexico, off of Central and South America, other than this one little pocket right here. And generally, not strong enough to be El Nino, but clearly not La Nina, not anywhere close. But again, we think this is the byproduct of 2 years worth of Kelvin waves just hanging around doing their thing. The question is, where do we go from here? One last little bit of data, Southern Oscillation Index. What's going on in the atmosphere above the ocean? Okay, there's warm water on the equator. One would think maybe we're trending towards or at least the atmosphere would sense some sort of an El Nino-ish pattern. All right, so the Southern Oscillation Index, difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti. If pressure is lower in Tahiti, the index goes negative. If it stays negative for a long enough period of time, that is an indicator of the active phase of the MJO, and if it's for a really long period of time, an indicator of El Nino. Today's contribution, 15.5. So that's clearly not active phase of the MJO or El Nino. And you just sort of go back. Now we were in a pretty good long run of negative numbers here for, I think it was 18 or 20 days, something like that. So that was our active phase of the MJO. We know that's dying out. The atmosphere already senses it. We've been positive for mostly 5 days in a row now. 30-day average, minus 6.20, so still suggestive of the active phase of the MJO, but yeah, actually look at that. We were at dead neutral March 22nd. We fell negative down to minus 7.38, so that was the active phase of the MJO, and now we sense we're starting to rebound from that. The 90-day average, the El Nino indicator, minus 3.50. Well, what was it a month ago? Minus 3.09. So we're still in this pattern where we're not El Nino. I mean, you need to be down to minus 12, 15, something like that. We're neutral, biased weekly El Nino, and very weakly, and we suspect that is even fading. What is the forecast? This is from the CFS model. Sea surface temperatures in the Nino 3.4 region, the official El Nino monitoring region. You want to have temperatures above half a degree for 5 consecutive months. And as of April 1st, we were confirmed, at least according to this, above half a degree. I don't think it really was that warm. But anyway, you see where the trend is going. Actually, yeah, this is about what it's been. We've been looking at this unchanged for a month now, at least, if not more, by July, down to 0.7 degrees below normal. As we get into the fall, October down to minus 1.2 degrees, dropping down to almost 1.5 degrees as we get into December. If this comes true, that's clearly a sign of a solid La Nina developing for this fall. Now, again, we've looked at the other models, and we did that, I think it was last week or the week before. This is for sure an outlier, but this model tends to be, we think, a little more sensitive. We'll know, again, spring unpredictability barrier, we're right in here. As we get right at this dividing line, we'll know where we're at, and we'll see it in the other data. We'll see sea surface temperatures in the Nino 3.4 region be falling as we get into May, according to this model. So we'll know in a month whether this is junk or whether this is maybe a very well-placed model that has sensed something that many of the other models have not. We'll just have to wait and see. A couple more weeks, but we'll have a pretty good indicator. But for right now, hey, small southern hemi-swell from a very south angle coming in toward, getting ready to come for California. Little New Zealand swell right behind that, and then potentially a better southwestern swell targeting primarily Hawaii, but also the U.S. West Coast. And if that isn't good enough, two swells potentially from the west and northwest with gales pushing up to the dateline. So that all looks good. The short term looking good. Wish we had access to the beach. Wish we could surf. But, well, at least we have something we can watch on the models. And then after that, though, the big question is, where do we go? We don't know. The models aren't giving us a clear picture. Spring unpredictability barrier in full control and making everyone scratch their heads. So we're on pins and needles, watching and waiting to see where this all ends up. So I guess we'll just have to keep watching. Anyway, if you enjoyed the video, give us a thumbs up. We'd certainly appreciate it. Subscribe if you haven't. Click the bell. You'll get a notification. And otherwise, you can view all this data, of course, on stormsurf.com. Stay safe. Be smart. Don't go out in the water if the beach isn't open. And two, don't go in a mob of people. Let's do our part. Let's keep the curve flat. The sooner we get through this, the sooner we can all get back in the water. But if everyone just starts doing their own thing, then the virus will spread, and that's not good for anybody. All right, so I want to be able to see you all and see your smiling faces next week and the week and the week after that. So let's be smart. Let's do the right thing. All right, we'll do this again next week. Same time, same channel. Thanks for watching.